gun reform bill that passed here in Massachusetts last week lowers the age for residents to be able to purchase self-defense sprays like mace and pepper spray. Western Mass News reporter Addie Patterson joins us live in studio after learning more. Addie?
Abby, if signed into law, this legislation would allow Bay State residents as young as 12 years old to apply for a self-defense spray permit.
In this bill, we now allow 12 to 15-year-olds to apply for a self-defense permit with parental permission, and 15 to 18-year-olds to independently apply for a self-defense spray permit.
Last week at the State House, the House, followed by the Senate, passed a compromise gun reform bill. One of the sections of the legislation brings down the age for legally obtaining mace, pepper spray, and other self-defense sprays. It allows juvenile as young as 12 to obtain a permit with their parents' permission, and anyone 15 years or older can get a permit on their own. State lawmakers highlighting how the bill would benefit some of the Commonwealth's younger residents.
We heard in Framingham from a young woman who described the hurdles she faced in seeking authorization to own self-defense spray for her own protection as she walks to and from school.
Western Mass News stopped by Guardian Uniform and Supply in Springfield and spoke with manager Chuck Blazer. He tells us his store hasn't seen too many young people interested in purchasing these type of self-defense products.
Most of our customers are 18 or older or right around that age, primarily for personal protection.
In Massachusetts, the current age to buy self-defense mace or pepper spray is 18 years old. Blazer tells Western Mass News he believes there are certain situations where having these self-defense products on hand would be helpful for underage residents.
A 17-year-old on a college campus, anywhere in Springfield or in Massachusetts, I think that would definitely benefit them. It would give them a little bit more of a sense of comfort.
Blazer adds that if you're not comfortable using self-defense sprays, there are other things young people can do to stay protected.
There's multiple people that run self-defense classes around here if they're concerned about not using pepper spray. That works really well. And then just obviously keeping alert of your surroundings, being aware of what's around you.
Now, there are many other sections of the sweeping gun reform bill. Governor Maura Healey has 10 days from the day it passed to either sign, veto, or return it with changes. Reporting live in studio, Addie Patterson, Western Mass News.